The stalker on the train. It was late. Later than I should have been out on the metro in Paris. I told myself it was fine though. I'd taken this route 100 times before. The cars were quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your ears, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of the train. That's when I saw him. He was sitting directly across from me. His gaze fixed out the window, distant and unfocused. At first he didn't seem out of place. Just another tired commuter. But as we pulled into the next station, something felt off. The doors opened, people shuffled in and out, and I noticed something strange. He didn't move. No fidgeting, no phone, no book. Just sitting there, unnervingly still. His eyes weren't on the window anymore. They were on me. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe he was just zoning out, right? But as the train rolled on, I felt the weight of his stare settle on me. Heavy and deliberate. I glanced up again. This time there was no mistaking it. He was watching me, unblinking. By the time we reached the next station, I couldn't stand it anymore. My heart was pounding as I got up, grabbing my bag and heading to the door. I decided to switch trains, hoping he'd stay put. But as I stepped onto the platform and moved toward the next car, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of his footsteps. I didn't look back. Couldn't. I slipped into the next train just as the doors hissed shut, relief washing over me. But when I turned around, there he was, standing in the connecting doorway, staring straight at me through the glass. I tried to keep calm, but panic bubbled up inside me. At the next stop, I made a split-second decision. I bolted off the train, my heart hammering in my chest. The platform was nearly empty, eerily quiet, and I hurried toward the nearest exit. Then I heard him. "Hey!" His voice cut through the silence, sharp and aggressive. I didn't stop. My legs burned as I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, the sound of his footsteps echoing behind me. "Wait, you forgot something." What was he talking about? I hadn't dropped anything. I pushed forward, my breath ragged, desperate to get out of the station. At the top of the stairs, I spotted him, a police officer standing near the ticket gates. I rushed over, nearly collapsing in front of him. "That man," I gasped, pointing back toward the platform. "He's following me." The officer straightened immediately, stepping between me and the man who was now halfway up the stairs. The officer called out, "Sir, stop right there." The man froze, his face twisting into a strange mix of defiance and feigned concern. "I was just trying to return her wallet," he said, holding up his hands. I shook my head, trembling. "I don't have a wallet." The officer wasn't convinced either. He patted the man down, and that's when he found it. A coil of rope tucked into the man's jacket pocket. And then a knife. I'll never forget the officer's face as he turned to me. His expression grim. "You made the right choice getting off that train," he said quietly. The man was taken away, his excuse unraveling under questioning. I later learned he had no wallet of mine, or anyone's. Just tools for something far more sinister. To this day, I can't ride the metro without thinking of him. Of how close I came to whatever he had planned.
The unclaimed luggage. Rush hour on the Tokyo Metro is like nothing else in the world. Packed bodies, the low hum of murmured conversations, and the rhythmic squeal of train wheels. That morning in 2007 was no different. The train was so crowded, I could barely move, let alone sit. But one thing stood out immediately, a suitcase left in the middle of the aisle. At first, I didn't think much of it. People leave luggage unattended all the time, forgetfulness, rushing, whatever. It's not uncommon. I figured its owner was just in another car or stuck somewhere in the crush of commuters. But then I noticed how carefully it was placed, upright and slightly angled, almost like it had been positioned deliberately. I glanced around the car, trying to spot someone who seemed like they were missing it. Everyone else looked just as confused, sneaking occasional glances at the bag but not saying a word. As the train approached the next station, I half expected someone to step forward, grab the suitcase and shuffle off. But no one did. The bag just sat there untouched as the doors slid shut and we lurched forward. A faint unease began to creep in. What if it wasn't just lost luggage? What if it was something dangerous? Tokyo's an enormous city. Anything could happen. I thought about reporting it, but before I could act, an older man near the suitcase finally moved it aside, tucking it against the wall to clear the aisle. The air in the car seemed to ease, just a little. But at the next station, still, no one claimed it. That was when I decided to act. I approached the station staff as we pulled into the next stop. "There's an unclaimed suitcase in my car," I said, my voice lower than I intended. Simmons picked it up. The attendant's eyes sharpened, and he immediately got on his radio. Within minutes, a small team arrived and removed the suitcase. I stepped off the train, not wanting to be in the same car in case the bag turned out to be something dangerous. As I stood on the platform, I watched them carry the suitcase to a secure room near the station office. Something about the way they handled it, careful but tense, set my nerves on edge. Minutes passed, then the murmurs began. Commuters craned their necks toward the station office, where the suitcase had been taken. A couple of station attendants emerged, pale-faced and tight-lipped. One of them was holding a phone, speaking in hushed tones. I don't know what compelled me to linger. I guess morbid curiosity, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. And then I overheard a single, chilling phrase from one of the staff's radios. Human remains? I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The suitcase I'd been standing inches away from, staring at for stops on end, was carrying a person, a body. Later, I learned the details through the news. The remains belonged to a young woman who'd been reported missing weeks earlier. She had been carefully wrapped and placed inside the suitcase, almost methodically. The authorities believed the killer had used the train to discreetly move the evidence. No fingerprints, no leads, no motive. The killer was never caught. I don't take the train much anymore, and when I do, I can't stop my eyes from wandering to every piece of luggage, every briefcase, every bag. Who knows what's inside? Every time I see an unclaimed suitcase, I wonder, is it just someone's forgotten belongings? Or is it something far darker?
The Phantom Passenger. Night shifts on the London Underground are a strange kind of quiet. The hum of the train, the occasional creak of the rails. It's like the city holds its breath after dark. I've worked as a train operator for years, and the routine is usually predictable. But that night in 2012, something happened that still makes my skin crawl. It was my last route of the night, heading toward the depot. By the time I pulled into the final station, the train was empty. At least, that's what I thought. As part of protocol, I walked through the cars to ensure no one was left behind. Most nights, it's uneventful. A stray commuter here or there, dozing off after a long day, easily woken and sent on their way. But when I reached the last car, I saw him. He was sitting near the middle, slumped forward, a worn-out hat pulled low over his face. I called out, "End of the line, mate." No response. Just the low hiss of the air brakes and the faint flicker of the overhead lights. I sighed and stepped closer, the rubber soles of my shoes squeaking against the floor. "Sir, you need to get off. We're done for the night." Still, he didn't move. His posture was unervingly rigid, like a statue draped in clothes. I was close enough now to hear the faint sound of breathing, shallow and rhythmic. My unease deepened. "Come on now, up you get," I said, my voice a little sharper this time. As I reached out to tap his shoulder, the train shifted slightly on the tracks, and the lights flickered again. And then, he was gone. I blinked, my hand hovering in mid-air where his shoulder had been. The seat was empty, completely untouched. I spun around, heart pounding, scanning the car for any sign of him. Nothing. Not a trace. I retraced my steps, checking every corner of the train, even under the seats. My pulse was hammering in my ears. I had seen him. There was no mistaking it. He had been there. When I returned to the driver's cabin, I called it in, still shaken. "I just had a passenger disappear on me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause on the other end of the radio. Then my supervisor replied, almost casually, "Ah, you've met the Phantom Passenger." I froze. "Excuse me?" He chuckled, as if it were some kind of joke. "Happens from time to time on that line. Last car, right? Hat pulled low? That's him." "Who is he?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't know exactly," he said. "Some say it's the ghost of a bloke who died in a crash decades ago. Never got off the train, I suppose." I wanted to laugh it off, but I couldn't shake the image of the man sitting there, unmoving, breathing, and then vanishing like smoke. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I couldn't stop glancing into the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that slumped figure reappear. I've told myself it was a trick of the light, exhaustion playing games with my mind. But even now, years later, I hesitate to check the last car on my night shifts. Because deep down, I know what I saw. And I know that somewhere, on the dark tracks of the London Underground, he's still riding the train. Waiting. Watching.